there, senior leader, and welcome to the Talent Sherpa podcast. This is where senior leaders come to rethink how human capital really works. I'm your host, Jackson Lynch, and today we are joined by co-host Scott Morris. He's the founder of Propulsion AI. And today we're going to dive into a heated debate. The question is, does remote work really work? So look, Scott, let me kind of kick this off, and I want to talk about the myth of remote work being a possible permanent solution. And my question to you is this: is remote work really viable as a long-term solution, or do you think we have confused a temporary set of flexibility and certainly employee desires with a sustainable practice? What do you think?
Well, I think the statistics are all on the side of remote work. And I think anybody right now, including the companies that, in my opinion, are making a mistake of forcing employees back into the office 100% of the time, I think that's a huge mistake, because not only is it viable, but it is here to stay. That is the direction that we're going to move. We're going to have some, I think, early retrenchment as companies try and use old mental models to manage their new workforce. But the fact is, we're going to come right back to it, because people are 35 to 40% more productive when they are working remote. They have better work-life balance. They've got more control over their time. They're ultimately happier. And organizations that are forcing the return are seeing up to 15% higher turnover than they had before. So I think the statistics are all on the side of remote work. But just like you and I touch on every time we talk about these subjects, it's not just what you do, it's how you do it. So let's pull this one apart.
I want to challenge the assumption that it always works, because I do think the way we think about it overlooks critical life cycle moments: crisis management, strategic pivots, turnarounds, new product design, things that require intense collaboration and alignment. And how do you think about remote work in those environments? Because I think it certainly suits real steady state operations, but in those pivotal moments that demand something different, I don't think it necessarily works.
Here's, I think, a reality that we have to deal with. And I don't disagree with your point. And again, it goes back to what I said, or what I was trying to say a second ago, which is it's not just what you do, it's how you do it, right? And if we have it's all one or it's all the other mentality, I think we're already on the road to disaster. Here's something that I think we want to be thoughtful about from the very beginning. Where is the best talent? And the best talent isn't always in one city. You may have an office in one city. You may have people that are spread across the nation. And if those people are collaborating, guess what? You don't have the opportunity to have them in a room together. They're going to be in different cities. They're going to be on Zoom together. So there's a little bit of what might be called, quote unquote, remote work. Even if they're in an office, they are remote from one another. And if you want to take advantage of the best talent that's available, rather than the best talent that's available in a place that you can physically locate them, I think you're going to have to make certain trade-offs from the very beginning, which means that it's not that we don't deal with those crisis situations. It's that we're going to have to invent new models for doing that more effectively than we had everybody in a single conference room.
I'm not going to disagree with you that there are material benefits from it. And for those who like taking midday walks as a way to kind of balance work-life, mental well-being, I totally get that as well. I'm just saying that there are constraints that we need to apply in there, because we, as a society, I think we have kind of gone down a path that is really unsustainable. And that is that you can do things without any sort of trade-off that comes through it. So I want to talk about the trade-offs, the constraints. And one of those constraints, I think, is when you are in a crisis mode and you have limited energy and resources, you're going to be focusing those energy and resources around collaboration and communication and alignment that you don't really have to spend as much time on if everyone is in the same room with the whiteboard, with the war room, with all the statistics on there, whether you're solving a technology challenge or whether you're trying to figure out how to scale up in headcount. Whatever problem you're solving, we have yet to figure out how to do it remotely, even with these wonderful tools, in a way that is as efficient as it is just getting everyone in the same room and figuring stuff out. What do you think?
Well, Let me try and challenge a piece of that and go with you on a piece. First of all, yeah, I think if you have everybody in the room together, yeah, your brainstorm is going to be better. I actually think there is, and I can't quote the actual study that suggested it, but I've read a couple of pieces on the value of that co-located brainstorming versus remote brainstorming, right? And the quality is absolutely higher. We're talking about an edge case, right? Because every day is not a crisis day. So here's what I think smart CHROs should do. They should start thinking about how to shape and evolve culture. And to go back to our definition, we've done other episodes on this. Culture is clarity of expectations about how you behave. So I think a smart CHRO is thinking, okay, are we just going to let remote meeting culture happen the way it happens, or are we going to shape it? Every single person is on camera. Nobody is messaging on Slack and Teams. They are present in the meeting, right? We shape that remote meeting culture the same way that we would shape in-person culture, meaning moving the levers at the executive, moving the levers at the senior leadership, ensuring that the behaviors are repeated, ensuring that we are out front with communication about those expectations, et cetera, right? There's a way to do that. So if you're going to do the remote, I think you've got to shape the remote. If you're going to bring people in, I think you do the same thing, right? And I'm a fan of, in a moment of crisis, I'm with you, Jackson. Bring everybody together. Set that as a part of your culture. Be explicit about it. We're a remote first culture, but it doesn't mean we're a remote only culture. And there are going to be times that we ask you to come in because there's a benefit to each other and to the business.
Yeah, I agree with you on that last piece. I disagree, however, with the concept that moment of crisis in a business is an edge case. I think unfortunately it is as common in kind of the S&B markets as any place else. And so, you lead a startup company, like your life is in that crisis mode, right? So I'm going to push back on the edge case. Now I've worked with companies that are kind of deep in the muck, and I've graduated to those because I like to build. But like most companies I've come across have a significant business challenge. And and when those things come about, boy, you just got to have all hands on deck. But let's move off that topic and talk about a different constraint. So I think there's a hidden talent cost of remote work that no one ever talks about. In fact, when I did talk about it on LinkedIn, it was the least popular thing I've ever written. And it was like I said, I don't like puppies. It was that visceral a reaction. And so I want your take before I kind of share my story. What do you think are the hidden impacts of remote work on talent development?
Well, look, proximity matters, and it's because of how we're wired as human beings. If you and I are sitting next to each other every single day, if we see each other in the hall, if we're eating lunch together, we're going to develop a close friendship. Now, you and I have done that. We've never been in the same city together, you and I. And yet we have a great working relationship because we're really intentional about it. So I think proximity matters, but it's not essential, right? You can do it without it, but you're going to have to expend a whole lot more work. I think the hidden talent cost, to directly answer your question, is people who are there in person are going to naturally have a different relationship with the people around them than the people that are remote.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think we first off we developed our friendship because we see the same barber. No one likes the reality that trust matters when it works against the things they want to do. But this is one where, candidly, we have not figured out how to create trust building moments in a way that is a easy shift, lift and shift to someone that darkens the door and says, "Hey, do you have a minute?" To someone that has the conversation at the proverbial water cooler or now dispenser with filtered water or the coffee maker. It's not that it can't be done. In my world, I have office hours. I don't take any meetings for a certain time at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And the expectation is no one on my team should either. And we use that for check-ins. We know that there's always going to be you're never more than 12 hours away from being able to talk about a particular issue. And when there aren't issues that are on top of us, I end up just calling to check in and say, "How are you doing? What's going on with the kid? What's getting in your way that I can be helpful for?"
But
I've been doing this for a while. I think I'm in like maybe the top 10% of folks that have figured this out. There is another 90% that haven't, And if you're working in one of their organizations, I think there are legitimate growth challenges to it because coaching is a contact sport. And I don't think we figured out a way to avoid that yet.
But if you just play back what you just said, you are extremely intentional about the interactions that you're creating, and you're setting the expectations with your people that you want them to be intentional too. And I think the problem is not, are they remote or are they not remote? The problem is, are we as leaders intentional or are we not intentional? Are we going to just let things happen? And for the crowd that's letting it happen around remote work, you're going to suffer a whole lot greater of the consequences than if you're intentional about it. I am willing to bet your people don't miss a beat. One, because I know you. Two, because you and I check in that way. And so I've experienced what you do firsthand. And I don't feel separate. And I'm willing to bet your people don't feel separate. And that's the benefit of being intentional. But what that requires is you have to accept we're in a different world. It's going to be a different set of rules, and we're going to have to rethink how we've done some things. And as a CHRO, it's not only our job to do it, but to help others do it. That doesn't make us culture keepers. That's the CEO. But it does mean that we are the shepherds. We are the ones who are teaching, coaching, and growing leadership around the subjects of culture.
No, look, I'm not going to debate that point. I think you're absolutely right. I just would like to point out that any company that I've ever come across, if you were to take a random survey of executives in those companies and ask, what is the single biggest thing that gives you pause around execution? The answer is going to be frontline management capability. They tend to have the largest span of control. And now you introduce barriers for them to be able to do that well. I think there are hidden costs associated with it, both from an employee standpoint and from a broader standpoint, that we have to calibrate in and net up against the benefits that come from being able to look more broadly.
We see the situation, Jackson, the same. We see, I think, maybe just listening to you right there, I think we see the obstacle differently. When I listened, what I heard was that you see the barrier as the nature of being remote. I see the barrier as the nature of thinking about work and designing roles around outcomes versus around tasks. Because frontline managers are concerned about, did we get all the work done? If the work is task based, I have to watch it. It becomes effort focused. If it's results based, it doesn't matter whether I see it happening or not. It matters, did you move the numbers or not? And so if we redesign every single role in the organization to be a results focused role, to be an outcomes focused role, then I think we reduce the impact that remote has on our ability as frontline managers, middle managers, to manage the work. What do you think about that?
I think it only took us 14 minutes of the podcast to come back to one of the central themes of every other podcast that we've done, which is outcomes matter. So I think that is 100% correct. Let me flip the frame of reference here for a second and talk about I think an assumption that we all make that may not be true. That is that remote work inherently improves work-life balance. Uh, Now, I think blurred lines between work and personal life escalate burnout and productivity anxiety. I know I personally have gotten in trouble in my house for walking in at 7 o'clock at night just to check one quick email. And then I walk out at 10 o'clock and everyone's gone to bed. I can't be the only one for whom that is there. How do you think about the unintended consequence from that work-life balance where the assumption might not actually be holding. It might be making it worse.
I, well, I've got kind of a partner assumption to go with that.
Okay.
And that is their well being, is their mental well being our responsibility? Or are creating the tools through which it can be managed effectively, is that our responsibility, right? Each person, each one of us as a worker has to take personal responsibility for the stuff around us. And so, yeah, it is a much harder blurred line to feel, at least, and I know it because I've been 100% remote for a very long time now, and to feel like you're actually walking away from work when you're doing it at home, I think that's really hard. You have to be really intentional. But is that my employer's responsibility, or is that my responsibility? And if it is mine, am I taking it? And if I'm taking it, am I doing the right things? And do I have the right tool set to enable me to do that? I don't have the answers to all those questions. I wish I did, because I haven't found a really good way to crack that code yet. But can we debate my personal responsibility aspect first, and then I'll come to yours immediately after?
Look, I do think there is a personal accountability to it. One of my favorite guys I ever worked for, his name was Scott Bontempo back at Frito-Lay. I won't even state the year. But Scott, this is when these issues started to pop up 20 plus years ago. And I asked Scott what he thought about it, and I thought his answer was so profound that it stuck with me, and it's even moved into my personal life. And he said, "It is not my job as an executive to create the standards for work-life balance. It is my job as an executive to create the freedom for you to define that for yourself while accomplishing the business goals." And the insight there is not only do you create the structure where it's okay, which was, I think in today's lingo, we call that a sense of belonging, but also that it ties in with and in the advance of rather than working against the business outcomes that are necessary. I think sometimes we want work-life balance, but what we really want is less work. And that's not the same thing. But it is not, in my view, the company's responsibility to set that. And then people have the ability to walk and make other choices around their careers. I'm with you. We have to give people the ability to execute their balance plans within the constraints of what the business needs.
I think to go back to the first question that you asked about remote work provide a hindrance on that work-life balance, let me kind of tell you where I think it doesn't, and that's commutes. I grew up in Los Angeles. I spent a lot of my early career in the car trying to get to my place of employment. I remember distinctly when I came home, I didn't come home, get out of the car, come into the house, and have quality time with the family. I had a decompression because I was in that car because I was frustrated. And anybody who's driven through LA traffic or Atlanta traffic or San Francisco traffic knows how challenging that can be. And I've driven all three of those markets, and I think they're all equally bad, right? I don't face that as a remote worker. When I decide I'm getting up from the desk and I'm going to go and have lunch, I'm out. Like, it moves into quality time, and it does it almost immediately. One, because my spouse is there, and two, because we can immediately sort of pick up, and I didn't have to have any transition in between. So I don't know whether everybody's personal experience is the same as mine. I doubt it. But I can tell you that aspect of work life balance is much better for me working remote than it was working in person.
So let me push on that because I think that's wonderful that works for you. I was interviewed for a book that came out literally as the pandemic was happening. It was called Remote Work. Chris Dyer, Kim Shepard wrote it. It was really, really good. And one of the contributions that I made to it was talking about the importance of having kind of routines if you're in remote work, because there are things that you do when you get up and you commute that create kind of mental milestones in your process. If you don't do that in a remote work environment, you could be sitting on doing a podcast in your underwear. I'm not, but I'm also not, I'm wearing shorts. I'm not wearing, the stuff that goes with my shirt, but at least I got up and took a shower. That doesn't always happen for everybody because it's like this, everything just gets melded into a one long day. So I do think long term, it'll be interesting to see whether in mass remote work allows more or less burnout. I think the assumption is that it will be easier for people. I think that's true if you figured out how to manage it effectively. I think
If
I think that's a big if in my view. So let me twist it now and ask. There is a dichotomy, I think, between a lot of HR people and a lot of people who are experiencing remote work and the executives who feel more comfortable having everyone in the building. And we'll take to the side your edge cases that you talked about in just normal steady state operation. Who's accountable, in your view, for making remote work effective? Is it the executive? Is it the employee? And if not the executive, by not being intentional, does that like silently tolerate dysfunction? If you're just kind of fighting the system rather than making the system work?
I mean, are you asking for my take on that?
I am, because I haven't figured that one out myself.
Leadership is always responsible. Leadership is responsible for everything that goes on in the business, one way or another. And remote work, in my mind, is just one more facet of our conversation around organizational culture. And again, for the definition of culture, it is a clarity of expectations. And so if it's not working, it's leadership's responsibility to say, hey, whatever systems we've put in place, whatever norms we've established or failed to, are not working. And I think that's principally the CEO's job. But the person that's going to go coach and develop are the people in the roles that you and I have occupied for the majority of our career. We're going to be the ones that are out helping other executives navigate that flow and make those changes. So I think it's leadership's responsibility. But by virtue of having clarity of expectations, systems, and modeled behaviors that make remote work as optimally effective as it can be.
So I agree with you. I can't add anything to what you said. I think you're exactly right. The good executives will set clear expectations. They ought to be outcome focused, and then everything is within there. As we kind of think in the last segment here of what advice we can give to chief HR officers and other senior leaders on what to go do, I would lead one of the first ones is have an actual philosophy and have the debate as to how you want these things to work. And I have found, at least in the companies that I've stepped into, both in the chair and as a consultant, that we get very focused on developing the rules. We haven't actually built the philosophy underneath that. Like, how long will you tolerate average performance? How fast do you need to spin up to be successful in your role? What are the expectations of managers when it comes to the development of their team? So I guess I'm interested in your take. How do CHROs proactively address those limitations of remote work while also preserving the advantages that we've talked about as we go through? What should they do?
Man, your point on philosophy is so important. Another thing that I love every time I listen to you is you're always focused on the CHRO has got to lead from the front. And I think borrowing that as an idea, don't wait for the executive team to go out and define these things. If you're the CHRO, go define them because it's an awful lot easier to debate something with somebody if it's concrete. So go make up the new world. Go make up that intentionality. What would your expectations be? Get them written down, get them in a format, start to circulate that and start to build leadership coalition around the conversation. You're not going to agree on everything, but let's start having that debate. I think that's the first and foremost. I think, and another thing that I think CHROs should be doing is thinking about the activities, not how many days do we want people in the office. If you're going to bring people in beyond crisis, which I think is a really good case for bringing people in, what are the other reasons? What are the other reasons to come together? Do you have a day a week that every single person is in the office because it is your group meeting day? Maybe. Maybe it's not a crisis. Maybe you're just, having the team meetings and you say, we're going to have all team meetings in person where you can be in person. So I think CHROs should be thoughtful about what you said, the talent philosophy, and should commit that to paper and start the debate. And I think they should be thoughtful about the kinds of activities that you want people together for and the kinds of activities that it's okay to not have them together for.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's nothing that pulls down credibility for the executive that's asked people to come into the office as having a normal day and then jumping on the Teams or the Zoom next to 5 people in their cubes with the other 3 people that happen to be like that is silly.
Yeah.
And there's no way I can justify that. There is a philosophy, or I guess a principle that I've used that I think is helpful. And I'll just share that so I'd love your take on it. That is the concept of when at the, we've talked about the broad when people should come in, but let's talk about it at the individual level. Okay. And you can take the same principle and apply it more broadly, but I think it most nicely fits with the individual. That is, when do you say you can't work remote anymore? And I would argue that the principle is performance enables flexibility. If you have someone that is in an outcomes oriented way, kicking butt and taking names, like, I don't really care what you do. By the way, I also don't care how much time you take, because I'm paying for the outcome. However, if there is someone who is habitually not meeting those expectations, where the most important thing for you to do is provide that structure, leadership, and coaching, and mentoring, and correction, and reinforcement, and support, and celebration, I think it's okay to say, you know what, you've lost the flexibility to work remote until we get these performance challenges built. What do you think?
Man, so one of the reasons I think you and I are friends is we see the world in similar terms. And I think you're spot on with that as an analysis. There are a couple of things that I think we have to do as CHROs to get ready for that. One is declare that that's what's happening up front and make sure that it's a universal declaration that everybody understands that that is the expectation. Second thing is, you and I, we take a shorthand on this outcomes oriented thing versus task oriented on jobs. But here's something that at least I've heard. Well, I was doing my job, but the procurement team, they didn't get it. If you're in an outcomes oriented job, it doesn't matter what another team does because it's your job to make sure they move, even if you don't have direct authority, because you are the one that is accountable for the ultimate result. And when you start to see it that way and people are underperforming, then sometimes it's a matter of not just, I'm going to pull you into, you know, be punitive or take something away from you, but I'm pulling you in because I'm going to help you. Maybe you don't understand how to navigate that through influence. Maybe you need guidance that I can't give you remotely because I can't see all of your interactions. So I think another important framing is when you lose that flexibility, it's because we want to help you. Because in a results oriented workplace, if you are not producing results, you're not going to be producing anything for very long if the company is thoughtful about its performance management. So when I pull you in, you're not losing something, you're gaining something, which is help. And that help is designed to help you move ahead and achieve the meaningful work that we've asked you to take on.
And Scott, this is the time of the podcast where we say we are going to hit the summary. So everyone who's been multitasking needs to pay attention now. What I think has been really cool about our conversation is it reveals that remote work isn't universally effective or inherently flawed. It's a choice with clear trade-offs. If you're a CHRO, you should be really thoughtful about where your company is in the life cycle, both at the macro level and at the department level. If you're going through significant departmental change, maybe that's the time where you need to bring them in. And when you do, be very thoughtful about what you're doing while they are there. The second thing that a CHRO should be thoughtful about is the principles within which remote work works. Be thoughtful about an outcome orientation. Be thoughtful about the principles of when you pull in individuals or teams where flexibility is driven by performance, not an inherent right. And then finally, I think we should really think about how is it that we as CHROs can be helpful to people who are remote when it comes to the growth and development that will ultimately drive them forward. My personal take is this is one of those, along with AI, that provides solutions without the wisdom to understand them. We have a potential crisis for junior and mid-level people that we have got to really be thinking about from an HR perspective. That'll be a whole different podcast. But to the degree that people are left behind because of their choice of where they work, as CHROs, we got to figure out how to balance it. What do you think I've missed?
Man, I think you got it complete. That's 100% of I think where we went.
So let me then wrap this up and say, I can't tell you how grateful Scott and I are that you took a few minutes to spend time with us today. If you enjoyed it and you're a regular listener like Dan, thanks for listening, Dan. I just want to say, make sure you go in and do the like and subscribe thing, whether you're on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. If you go in and you go 5 stars and you leave a review, more people will see the pod. And that is how we can bring whatever goodness you think there is here to more people. When it comes to kind of thinking about how to work better with outcome orientation as a build into your system, please check out Scott's website over at Propulsion AI. And if you want to learn more about the future of work and dive deep into these and other topics, you can do so over at my Substack. It's at talentsherpa.substack.com. You can also head on over to mytalentsherpa.com, where we're building out kind of that ecosystem with some offerings. And to be fair, it's still in process. So, if something doesn't work, just give me a call, let me know. But we have more stuff there. So until next time, I just want to say thank you again for listening to the Talent Triple podcast. This is where senior leaders come to rethink how human capital works. So until next time, raise the bar, keep listening to your organization, and keep on climbing.